Christians can sometimes have a reputation for being a bit simple-minded. People could be forgiven for accusing those of us who believe in a literal resurrection for being ignorant about what really goes on in the world. But the accusation also reveals a misunderstanding of what faith is. People think that believing in God means leaving your brains at the door. And faith and intellect are seen as a kind of seesaw. Having more of one means less of the other. So how do we reconcile the two? Well, we start by recognizing that both lovers of science and lovers of faith get this wrong. What do I mean by that? Well, the lover of science, for example, thinks that the more science we have, the less faith. In other words, if you really believe in the natural laws of the world, the empirical sciences, that means you can't have faith because so much of faith involves the miraculous, the supernatural, the unseen, that Jesus really could rise from the dead. They think to be intellectual, to be scientific means that you can't have faith. But the opposite is also true. Because sometimes the Christians, lovers of faith, can turn that seesaw the other way, almost like that more faith means less intellect. In fact, in my tradition, historically, in the Pentecostal movement, the faith in miracles and the supernatural began amongst the working classes, the uneducated. And in fact, at the time, it was like people who had education and degrees found it difficult to believe in the miraculous. And so there was almost a reaction against it. And sometimes having education and degrees is seen as a negative. But both are misplaced. Faith and science or intellect is not a seesaw. You can't put them in the same category. They are two different genres. A bit like trying to compare an apple and a frog. You see, one involves facts. One involves head, cerebral knowledge. The other involves the heart, revelation, the spirit. You can have one as well as the other. You can love God with your spirit and with your mind. Having faith doesn't mean leaving your brains at the door. There can be a happy coexistence. I often think about the disciples. You know, Peter was an unschooled, ordinary fisherman. He worked with his hands. He wasn't intellectual. In fact, he talked about Paul, who was trained by Gamaliel, an intellectual and expert. And Peter said of Paul's writings that sometimes they're a little bit hard to understand. You have a person who's a specialist in education and one who is not. But notice that they both moved in the supernatural. They both believed in the spirit realm. They both believed in the miracles of Jesus and saw those things take place in their lives. You can have one and the other. For us today, it means also that we can live with both. We can fully engage our minds. We can use our common sense. We can do study. We can increase our intellect. We can use the skills of the natural world. In fact, the early scientists were Christians who believed that God brought order into a chaotic world. And that's what motivated them to study the sciences. But at the same time, we can believe in a God that hasn't changed, to believe in a God that works in the supernatural, to believe in miracles, to have faith, to believe that God will still work that way in our lives. You don't have to leave your brains at the door to be a follower of Jesus. Thanks for tuning in today to God Conversations. For more on having your own God conversation, check us out at godconversations.com.